It was one of those nights where everything seemed to go perfectly wrong, and I still can't figure out if I should be mortified, furious, or just thankful it didn't end worse. Let me set the scene. I'm 25, working from home, and just getting into the rhythm of my job. I've had a pretty uneventful few weeks, mostly sitting in my apartment, managing emails, and handling projects. I live alone in a fairly decent one-bedroom place in the city, but like a lot of people, I tend to keep to myself. My social life isn't exactly booming, but I'm used to it. That Friday night started like any other. I had been working hard all week and decided to treat myself to a night of relaxation. I put on some comfy clothes, grabbed my favorite snacks, and ordered a pizza. The plan was simple: eat, watch some Netflix, and forget about work for a few hours. Around 8 p.m., my pizza arrived, and it was just the right kind of greasy goodness. I was already in my couch potato mode when I got a text from my friend, Jake. Jake and I have been friends since college, but we don't hang out that often, so when he messaged me out of the blue, I assumed it was either some random meme or him inviting me out to drink, which I was definitely not in the mood for. The message read, "Yo, are you home? I need a favor." Now, I'm the kind of person who doesn't mind helping out friends, but I was in full relaxation mode, so I hesitated. Still, I texted back, "Yeah, what's up?" His response was brief. "Can I come by? I'll explain when I get there." This, of course, raised a red flag. Why was he being so vague? We're friends, but we don't exactly do random surprise visits. Still, I told myself it was probably nothing serious. Maybe something minor like needing help moving a couch or some dumb thing like that. About 30 minutes later, Jake arrived at my door. He looked unusually agitated, but I thought nothing of it. He walked in without waiting for me to offer a drink, which is a little strange considering he was always the one who took forever to make decisions on what he wanted. But I shrugged it off. As soon as he stepped inside, he blurted out, "Okay, so I need to hide something. And you need to keep it a secret." Now, my brain immediately went to the worst-case scenario. I know Jake. He's a good guy, but he's also had his fair share of questionable decisions in the past. I was trying to stay calm, trying to be a good friend, but this whole situation felt off. "What do you mean hide something?" "Like, in my apartment?" I asked, already sensing I might be in way deeper than I wanted to be. He nodded seriously. "Yeah, I can't explain right now, but just trust me. It's for a few days. I promise I'll get it back to you, and you won't even know it's here." At this point, I was trying to process everything. Hide something? What could it be? A body? Drugs? A stolen car? My mind was running wild with the possibilities. But I didn't want to overreact. Maybe it was just something silly. I opened the door a little wider to let him in more fully, and he immediately walked toward the bedroom. Wait, hold on," I said, standing in front of him. "What exactly are you trying to hide here?" He paused for a second, then sighed. "Okay, fine, I'm going to be honest with you. It's a hamster." I blinked. "A hamster? What are you talking about?" Jake rolled his eyes. "I'm trying to get a pet for my girlfriend. She loves hamsters, and I was supposed to surprise her with it tomorrow, but her mom found out and flipped out. She's been freaking out all day. So I need somewhere to stash him for tonight, and I'm hoping you can keep him safe until tomorrow. I'll come back to get him in the morning." I let out a long breath. A hamster? Of course. This was ridiculous. "You're seriously hiding a hamster at my place? For real?" Jake looked like he was pleading with me. "Dude, you know I wouldn't ask if it wasn't urgent. Please, just do this for me. It's a tiny cage. You won't even notice him." Against all my better judgment, I gave in. Maybe it was the absurdity of the situation, or maybe I just didn't want to be a jerk. "Fine. Bring it in. Just don't make it weird." He smiled like I had just handed him $1 million. "You're the best." "Thanks, man." A minute later, Jake returned with a hamster cage, which looked like it came straight from a pet store, complete with little tubes and bedding. I honestly didn't expect it to be so elaborate. I half expected a tiny shoebox with a hamster in it. He placed the cage on my kitchen counter, told me to keep it in a quiet corner of the apartment, and left in a hurry. I was left standing there, staring at this little creature in a cage, wondering what the hell I had just agreed to. The hamster was cute enough, but it wasn't exactly a normal thing to hide in your apartment for a friend. Still, I figured I'd keep it out of sight in the corner of the kitchen and go back to my pizza. No harm done, right? That night, I went to bed, and the hamster was still in its cage. I set a small towel over it to keep it dark and quiet. I didn't want it to be all stressed out, even though I honestly had no idea how to care for it. I figured I could deal with it in the morning when Jake came to get it. Now, here's where things went sideways. The next morning, I woke up to a weird noise. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but as I laid there, it became more distinct. It sounded like a faint squeaking, then scratching. I turned my head to look at the kitchen, and that's when I saw it. The cage. It was empty. I jumped out of bed, my heart racing. I checked the towel, no hamster. I scrambled around the kitchen like a maniac, looking behind the fridge, under the counters, anywhere I could think of. But the hamster was gone. My mind immediately flashed to the worst-case scenario. The hamster had somehow escaped, and now it was loose in my apartment. I couldn't even imagine what that would be like. I'd probably never see it again. Panicking, I texted Jake, asking him if he had come by early to get the hamster. But there was no response. I called him. No answer. I spent the next 45 minutes frantically searching for a tiny hamster in a small apartment, looking in every nook and cranny, trying to figure out where it could be. It was like playing an absurd game of hide-and-seek with a tiny, furry creature. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I found the hamster. It was in my bedroom, sitting on top of my favorite pair of sneakers. It had chewed through the laces and was sitting there looking like it had been up all night, partying. I just stared at it, unsure whether I was angry or amused. That little guy had caused me so much stress for no reason, but also, it was kind of cute. At that point, I decided I was in too deep. I texted Jake, "Get over here right now and deal with your hamster." He showed up an hour later, laughing hysterically. Bro, I swear to God, I didn't think it would be this dramatic. He picked up the hamster, apologized profusely, and took it home. I don't think I'll ever get over how weird that night was. A hamster caused me more stress than I could have ever anticipated, and honestly, I'm still not sure how I feel about having been part of that whole ordeal. But hey, at least it's a good story, right? If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. TIFU by accidentally sending my boss a deeply personal pros and cons list about quitting my job, comparing him to a golden retriever with anger issues. It all started about a month ago when I hit my absolute limit with my job. I work at a medium-sized marketing firm where I've been grinding for 4 years. The burnout had been creeping in like a slow leak, and I finally decided it was time to start weighing my options. My therapist suggested I write things out to gain clarity, so one evening I sat down with a glass, 3 glasses, of red wine and started crafting the most brutally honest pros and cons list about quitting my job. I meant for it to be therapeutic, cathartic even. What it turned into was a full-on roast of my boss, my workplace, and, somehow, myself. I saved it in a doc titled Just Thinking Docs on my personal Google Drive. It wasn't meant to see the light of day, let alone the corporate fluorescent ones. Some highlights from the list. Pros of quitting asterisk. We'll finally stop having stress dreams about responding to emails with typos and being fired in front of the whole office while naked. No more pretending to laugh at boss's motivational quotes that he clearly gets from the back of protein bars. Freedom to pursue actual passions instead of pretending synergy means something to me. Cons of quitting asterisk. Might have to move back in with parents and explain to extended family why I'm now between opportunities. Will miss Jerry from accounting. He brings donuts every Friday and once helped me hide from our boss when I was crying in the break room. No longer get to watch my boss try to relate to Gen Z employees by calling TikTok the Tic Tac. And then the line that would come to define my week. My boss is like a golden retriever with anger issues. Energetic, loyal, but will absolutely flip out if you touch his snacks or question his spreadsheet formatting. Anyway, life moved on. I started interviewing quietly, kept things professional at work, and all was well. Until this week. I had been preparing a presentation for a major pitch. My boss, let's call him Greg because of course it's Greg, asked me to send over all related files to him in advance. In my rush, navigating 17 open tabs, 3 Slack conversations, and my cat aggressively stepping on my keyboard, I zipped up my work pitch folder and emailed it to him. You can see where this is going. Unbeknownst to me, I had, in my infinite organizational chaos, accidentally dragged just thinking docs into the same folder. I realized it the next morning when I was cleaning up my drive and noticed it was missing from its original spot. My stomach sank. I checked the sent email. There it was. Pitch files _final. Zip sent to Greg at 11:43 p.m. the night before, complete with my confidential career breakdown. At first, I told myself, he probably won't even open that one. Then I remembered Greg is the kind of guy who once printed a 94-page Excel spreadsheet to get a better feel for the numbers. Sure enough, that afternoon I get a calendar invite titled, "Let's chat, quick touch base." No context, just fear. I walk into the conference room and Greg's already there, laptop open, a weird smirk on his face. He gestures for me to sit. So he starts, I read your document. I briefly consider grabbing the fire extinguisher and going out in a blaze of artificial snow and pride, but instead, I just say, I'm so sorry. That was never meant for anyone to see. It was just a way for me to process. He holds up a hand. Look, he says, first of all, I am loyal. And I do get territorial about my spreadsheets. I stare at him, unsure if this is good or very, very bad. Then he laughs. Genuinely laughs. You absolutely roasted me, he says. Golden retriever with anger issues? That's honestly accurate. I blink. You're not mad. Oh, I'm pissed, he says. But mostly at myself. Clearly I haven't been creating an environment where you feel heard or supported. And while I'd love to sit here and defend every protein bar quote I've ever shared, maybe it's time we had a real conversation. We end up talking for an hour. About burnout. About leadership. About how he knows morale's been low, and he's been trying to fix it with pizza parties and pep talks instead of, actually checking in with people. To my shock, the conversation ends with him offering me some time off. *paid*, to figure out what I really want. Whether you come back or not, I'd rather you be honest with yourself than stay here miserable, he said. I took the time off. I traveled a bit, thought about what I want next. And while I still don't think I'll stay at the company forever, I came back for now mostly because I realized that not every boss would react the way Greg did. Especially after being compared to a snack-defensive golden retriever. Now there's a new rule in the office. Greg gets first dibs on all leftover snacks, and if anyone questions his spreadsheet formatting, they have to show him the tic-tac dance they learned that week. Also, I password protect everything now. TIFU by accidentally eating a $1,200 cake and ruining a surprise engagement party. This happened a few months ago, but I'm still getting roasted for it every time I see my cousin or anyone else who was at the party. I've told this story so many times I might as well immortalize it here. So, a little context. I, 28M, live in a duplex with my cousin Nate, 32M. We're both pretty chill, live separately but close enough to share stuff like the driveway and a garage fridge. Nate's girlfriend, now fiancé, Becca, is big into baking. Like, she does custom cakes for weddings, events, all that stuff. It's her side hustle, and she's crazy good at it. We're talking hyper-realistic designs, edible gold, hidden tears, that kind of level. One Friday afternoon I got off work early, starving because I skipped lunch for a last-minute meeting. I get home and remember I had nothing left in the fridge except some sad condiments and a can of LaCroix. So I figure I'll raid the garage fridge, which is sort of communal but mostly used for overflow or when either of us meal preps. I open it and boom, I see this absolute unit of a cake. It was beautiful. Round, triple-layered, chocolate-on-chocolate masterpiece with these swirling chocolate shavings, a glossy finish, and little gold flakes on top. It looked like the final boss of all birthday cakes. Now, at this point, I should have thought, maybe this isn't for me. But hunger overrides reason. There was no note, no, do not eat label, no warning signs. Just a lonely, majestic cake. My lizard brain decided it was leftovers from one of Becca's commissions, and maybe they didn't want it, or it was extra. I grab a knife and take a huge slice. And oh my God, it was the best cake I've ever had in my life. Moist, rich, not too sweet, and the gold flakes gave it a crunch I didn't know I needed. I end up eating 2 full slices, then feel kinda guilty, and wrap the rest carefully with foil. I even wiped the knife clean and rearranged the cake slightly to hide the missing pieces. I figured no one would notice or care. An hour later, I'm playing some game when Nate storms into my room like he's hunting for a fight. "Did you eat the cake in the garage fridge?" I immediately froze. I knew I was caught, but didn't realize how badly. "Yeah man, sorry, was that Becca's? I only had a bit. It was amazing, by the way." His eyes got wide. Like, really wide. Then his face turned red. "Dude, that cake was for tonight. For the party. For the proposal." Cue instant internal screaming. Turns out tonight was supposed to be a surprise engagement party. Becca had made this custom cake. Not just any cake, but a hyper-detailed replica of the bar where they had their first date. Entirely edible, complete with fondant stools, tiny chocolate bottles, and even an edible "Will you marry me?" sign hidden inside the 3rd layer. She'd worked on it for over 3 days. I had eaten a chunk of the bar. Literally. Like, part of the counter and 2 chairs. Becca came over shortly after, took one look at the cake, and burst into tears. I don't think I've ever felt so small in my life. Everyone who was in on the proposal, her sister, Nate's friends, even my aunt, found out what happened and immediately jumped on a group chat that I was very not a part of. Meanwhile, Becca tried to salvage what she could, but the illusion was ruined. You can't exactly hide a giant chunk missing out of the centerpiece. They ended up delaying the party until the next weekend. Nate proposed privately that night instead, and she still said yes, thank God. But man, I was not invited to that party. Or the redo. And I don't blame them. The worst part? The cake cost over $1,200. Between the materials, custom molds, edible gold, and man-hours, it was one of her most elaborate works yet. Becca didn't even charge for the labor, since it was for her own engagement. I offered to pay for it. She refused, saying it wouldn't bring the moment back and she just needed space. I also offered to help with cleanup, dishes, whatever, anything. Eventually, she cooled off and we're on okay terms now, but she still introduces me to people as the cake killer. My cousin has forgiven me, kind of. But every time we're at a family dinner or barbecue, someone inevitably says, "Hey, don't let him near the cake," followed by 30 minutes of laughter at my expense. Moral of the story? If it looks too good to be yours, it probably isn't. So, this happened last week and honestly, I'm still processing it. I'm a 29-year-old guy who lives alone, and I've always been pretty independent and low-key. I work from home as a freelance graphic designer, so my days typically consist of waking up, working at my desk, grabbing lunch, and working some more. It's a pretty simple life, but it's exactly how I like it. Recently, I've been trying to be a bit more social, so I downloaded a dating app, nothing too serious, just looking to meet new people and see where it goes. A few days ago, I matched with a girl named Jessica on the app. She seemed pretty cool, super funny, liked a lot of the same things I did, and we got along great through our initial chats. We agreed to meet up for dinner at a casual Italian place in the city. I was pretty nervous, but I was also excited because she seemed like someone I could really hit it off with. So, the night of the date arrives. I spend an extra amount of time picking out my outfit, trying to look effortlessly cool, but also like I put in some effort, and making sure I look presentable. I don't want to seem too nervous, but I totally am. I head out to the restaurant a little early, grab a table, and wait for her to arrive. I think she's going to be just as nervous as I am, but I figure we'll be able to ease into the conversation once we start talking. She shows up about 10 minutes late, which is no big deal. I was a little early, after all. She's exactly like her pictures, even more beautiful in person. She's wearing a casual but flattering dress, and she has this confident smile on her face. I can't help but feel a little intimidated, but I'm trying to keep it together. We greet each other, and after a few awkward moments of small talk, we dive into the menu. Here's where I really messed up. I'd been texting my best friend Steve all day, getting his advice on things like first date etiquette, how to avoid making a fool of myself, and general stuff like that. Steve's a real smooth talker, has been with his girlfriend for over a year now, and he's always giving me tips. Well, about an hour before my date, I was telling him how excited but nervous I was. He was being his usual self, saying things like, "Don't overthink it, man. Just be yourself." And then, just as a joke, he sent me a message that said, "Just tell her you're a world-class snuggler." Now, I know Steve, and I knew he was just messing around. He's always sending me ridiculous messages like that to lighten the mood. But for some reason, I took him seriously. Maybe it was the nerves. Maybe it was just the fact that I hadn't been on a date in a while. But when Jessica sat down at the table and we started talking, I thought, hey, why not use that line? I figured it would be a funny way to break the ice. So about 20 minutes into dinner, we were talking about random stuff, books, movies, past relationships, and I felt like we were both warming up to each other. Then, for some reason, my brain thought it was the perfect time to bring up world-class snuggling. No clue why I thought it was a good idea, but I just blurted it out. I said, "So, just to let you know, I'm a world-class snuggler. Like, I've won awards." She paused for a second, blinking at me. There was a long silence. I immediately regretted saying it, but it was already out there, so I had to double down. I tried to salvage it with a laugh and said, "I mean, it's a pretty prestigious title. You know, I've perfected the art." She stared at me, clearly trying to figure out if I was joking. I honestly couldn't tell if she thought I was being serious or if she thought I was some weird creep. Then, she gave me this awkward smile and said, okay. Interesting. Is that, like, a skill you can show?" I just about choked on my water. I tried to play it off, but things were spiraling quickly.
No.
I mean, I'm not going to give you a demonstration right now. That'd be strange. She nodded slowly, still looking a little unsure. I could see the wheels turning in her head as she processed what had just happened. I could practically hear her thinking, "Is this guy for real?" For the rest of the dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had completely ruined the mood. We made some small talk, but it was clearly a little awkward. I kept trying to bring the conversation back to more neutral topics, but every time I opened my mouth, I could feel her picking up on the weird vibe I had just set. Finally, after about an hour and a half of the most awkward dinner I've ever had, she said she had to get going. We didn't even get dessert. I walked her out to her car, and she gave me a quick hug before getting in and driving off. I stood there for a good 5 minutes, replaying the whole evening in my head. I was mortified. How the hell had I thought telling her I was a world-class snuggler was a good idea? Was I really that socially awkward? I texted Steve right away, telling him what had happened, and his response was, "Bro, what the hell? I was just messing around." The next day, I sent Jessica a message apologizing for being weird and trying to explain that I was just nervous. She never responded. It's been a week since the date, and every time I think about it, I cringe. I know it's probably not the end of the world, but damn, I've learned a valuable lesson here. Never take dating advice from Steve, especially when it comes to saying things like, world-class snuggler. I don't think I'll ever live this one down. TLDR. Went on a date with a girl I met on an app, tried to break the ice by telling her I'm a world-class snuggler, and it completely backfired. Haven't heard from her since. TIFU by accidentally sending my nudes to my boss and trying to cover it up like a complete idiot. So, I'm in my late 20s, and I work at a small marketing firm. It's a pretty chill office, and we all get along well. My boss, let's call him Mike, is a great guy, super laid back, always cracking jokes, and we actually get along really well. At least, I thought we did until yesterday. What I'm about to tell you is a chain of events that started with one simple mistake, and it turned into my worst nightmare. It all started after work hours when I was at home, relaxing after a long day. I was chatting with a guy I'd been seeing, let's call him Jake. We were texting back and forth, talking about random stuff, and honestly, things had been going really well between us. After a bit, the conversation turned a little more private. Jake had been sending me some Rather suggestive texts, no, not nudes, you pervs, and the conversation started getting heated. Now, I've never been shy when it comes to sexting, and in the heat of the moment, I figured it would be fun to send a little something back. I had just finished taking a shower, and my bathroom mirror had that perfect foggy, steamy look, perfect for a little cheeky photo. So I snapped a couple of pictures. I figured I'd send Jake the best one, but as I was going to hit send, I got a notification. It was an email from work. My company had been discussing a new marketing strategy, and Mike, my boss, had emailed me to ask if I had reviewed a certain proposal. The email was urgent, and he said he needed my feedback within the hour. In my distracted state, I thought, oh, perfect. I'll reply quickly, send him the feedback, and then get back to Jake. It wasn't a big deal, just a quick reply with a few thoughts. So, without thinking much about it, I opened my email, attached the document, and typed out my response. In the process of trying to get the email sent, I was juggling multiple things on my phone, switching between messages and email, trying to multitask. Now, here's where I made my first mistake. Instead of sending the email to Mike, I accidentally attached the nude photo I had taken instead of the marketing proposal document. You'd think I'd notice, right? But nope. I just hit send and went back to my conversation with Jake. It wasn't until a few minutes later that I realized what had happened. I immediately froze. I went back to my email app, hoping I could somehow retract it, but it was too late. Mike had already opened the email. And there it was, my naked body, in all its glory, attached to the message meant to discuss work. I stared at my phone for a solid 10 seconds, just paralyzed with horror. There was no undoing it. I had sent an explicit photo to my boss. I had sent my nudes to my boss. I honestly thought I was going to pass out. I was trying to think of a way to make this better, but the more I thought about it, the worse it seemed. There was no context to the email. Mike had to be sitting there, looking at the photo, wondering why the hell I'd send it to him. Maybe I could claim it was a mistake? Maybe I could say it was meant for Jake? But I couldn't come up with any reasonable excuse in the moment. I couldn't even form a coherent thought. I started texting Jake in a panic, asking if he had received the picture I meant to send to him. I was hoping he'd somehow be able to come to my rescue and say, "No, I didn't get it. I have no idea what you're talking about." But that didn't happen. Instead, Jake responded with, babe, I think you sent that to the wrong person." I was spiraling at this point. My heart was racing, and my palms were clammy. I needed to fix this. I had to fix this. So, I did what any reasonable person would do in my situation. I tried to cover it up by sending an immediate follow-up email to Mike. In my panic, I didn't think through the tone or content of my response, so I basically dug myself into a deeper hole. The email read, "Hi Mike, I think I made a mistake with my attachment. I was trying to send you the marketing proposal, but I must have attached the wrong file. My sincerest apologies for the confusion." I tried to sound casual, like this kind of thing happened every day, but the problem was that wasn't going to fly. Mike was smart, and I'm sure he could tell that the wrong file I attached wasn't a work proposal. But I couldn't stop myself. I hit send again, hoping it would somehow make everything better. It didn't. I waited for what felt like hours, just staring at my phone, hoping Mike wouldn't reply. But of course he did. A few minutes later, I received a message from him. My heart dropped when I saw it. Not quite the document I was looking for, but thanks for sharing. Maybe next time we can keep it professional. Winking face. That was it. My stomach dropped into my feet. I was mortified. I wanted to die. Mike had seen the photo, and instead of firing me or calling HR, he was being ridiculously casual about it. Too casual. It was the kind of message that made me think, is he laughing at me? Is he mocking me? Or is he actually okay with this? I had no idea what to say, so I didn't respond. I just let it sit there, hoping he would forget about it. But no such luck. Over the next couple of days, Mike would occasionally make little comments about it. He'd say things like, "Hey, make sure to double-check your attachments next time, huh? Or, if you ever need a break, you should try a vacation, maybe one where you don't accidentally send nudes to your boss." It was painfully awkward. At this point, I wasn't sure if he was genuinely cool about it or if he was passive-aggressively letting me know that he thought I was an idiot. Eventually, I had to face him in person at the office. I was dreading it, but I needed to talk to him about the whole situation. He just smiled at me and said, "No worries. It happens. Just be more careful next time." We talked for a bit, and honestly, he was surprisingly chill about it, but I couldn't shake the embarrassment. I never, ever wanted to see him again, let alone have him see me in any other way than a professional employee. Moral of the story: don't multitask while sexting. Don't send nudes to anyone unless you know for sure it's going to the right person, and for the love of all things sacred, don't accidentally send them to your boss. TLDR, sent nudes to my boss instead of a work proposal. Tried to cover it up with a ridiculous email that only made it worse. My boss was oddly cool about it, but it's still super awkward. So, a little background. I'm a 26-year-old guy, and I've always prided myself on being the responsible one. My friends often joke that I'm the mom of the group, always keeping track of schedules, making sure we don't miss any flights, reminding people to drink water, you name it. I'm the guy you want to be with if you ever need someone to organize a party, book a trip, or just make sure everyone gets home safely after a night out. For the most part, I've never really done anything that could be classified as a fuck-up, at least not in a huge way. That is, until recently. It all started a few weeks ago when my best friend, Matt, invited me on a weekend trip to the mountains. He'd been planning a little getaway with a few of our other friends, just a small group of us, maybe 6 people total. We rented this beautiful cabin in the middle of nowhere, fully equipped with a hot tub, a fire pit, and enough room to get a little rowdy if we wanted to. Everyone was pumped. I was pumped. A weekend of hiking, board games, and drinking under the stars sounded like heaven. So, a couple of days before the trip, Matt asked if I could help out with the food and drinks. No big deal. He said, "Just grab some snacks, booze, and a few things for breakfast and dinner, and I'll take care of the rest." Being the responsible one, I took it upon myself to make sure everything was perfect. I had a detailed shopping list, mapped out the route to the cabin, and made sure to get everything on Matt's list. The day of the trip rolls around, and I'm feeling great. I load up my car with all the groceries and coolers I've prepared, and head to Matt's place. The whole group meets up, and we start the drive to the cabin. It's about a 4-hour drive, but we're all in good spirits, joking around, singing along to music, and talking about what we're going to do once we get there. The weather is perfect, and it looks like it's going to be a perfect weekend. We finally arrive at the cabin in the late afternoon, and we're all excited. The place is beautiful. It's cozy and secluded, with a giant fireplace and a deck that overlooks a stunning view of the mountains. We start unpacking the cars, and I'm feeling pretty proud of myself. Everything's packed: snacks, drinks, the food for dinner, breakfast, and even some fancy cheeses for appetizers. I feel like the weekend is about to go perfectly. Now, here's where things went south. As we're unloading, one of our friends, Sarah, mentions that she's vegetarian. No big deal, right? I'm sure I can work around it. So I ask her what she eats, and she lists out a bunch of vegetarian-friendly foods. I take a mental note, thinking, okay, I've got this. But then she casually drops in that she's also lactose intolerant. I freeze. I'd already bought a ton of cheese, and we were planning to make some creamy pasta for dinner. I'm not entirely sure how I missed that detail, but there it was. She says, "Oh, no worries though. I can just eat the veggie stuff and skip the cheese and cream." But I'm not having it. I'm the guy who can't stand to screw up when it comes to food, especially when I'm in charge. I'm determined to make sure Sarah can eat everything, so I tell her, "Don't worry. I've got it covered. I'll run to the store and grab some lactose-free stuff." Matt and the others insist it's not a big deal, but I'm already in full panic mode. I grab my car keys, tell everyone I'll be back in a bit, and head out for a quick trip to the nearest grocery store, which is about 20 minutes away. It's a small town, and it's starting to get late, but the store is open until 9 p.m., so I'm not worried. I get there, and immediately, I'm struck by how few options there are for lactose-free products. There's a small section of specialty foods, but it's mostly dairy substitutes and gluten-free stuff. I find a few options: a lactose-free cheese, some almond milk, and a couple of dairy-free creamers, but nothing that screams gourmet or luxury. I settle for what I can find and rush back to the cabin, thinking, okay, this isn't ideal, but at least Sarah will have options. By the time I get back, it's already dark, and the group is settling into the hot tub. I bring everything inside and start unloading the groceries, feeling a little self-conscious. I've got the lactose-free cheese and cream alternatives, and I'm wondering how everyone is going to feel about it. I quickly set everything up and get to work on the pasta. I tell Sarah that I've got the lactose-free stuff ready, and she looks relieved. She's nice about it, but I can tell she's a little skeptical. No one else really cares, they're just excited about the food, and they're a little buzzed from the wine. The pasta finally finishes cooking, and I proudly serve everyone a plate, thinking everything is going according to plan. The first few bites are met with silence as everyone digs in. Then I hear it. Matt, who's the first to speak, says, "Dude, this pasta is weird." I look over, and the rest of the group is staring at their plates. I try a bite, and instantly, I can tell what's wrong. The lactose-free cream I bought has a strange, almost sour taste. The cheese is rubbery, and the whole dish has a weird aftertaste. I try to cover it up, saying, it's probably just the lactose-free stuff, right? But I can see everyone trying to hide their disgust. Sarah, who's been politely nibbling at her food, finally says, "Honestly, I think I'm just going to pass on the pasta. I'm good with the bread and veggies." Everyone agrees that the pasta is pretty much inedible, and the mood starts to shift. I'm mortified. I spend hours planning, and here I am, serving up the worst pasta anyone has ever had. To make matters worse, no one wants to say anything to hurt my feelings, but it's clear that they're all disappointed. Matt finally pipes up, "Maybe we should just order pizza or something." At this point, I just want to disappear. We end up ordering pizza, and the night isn't a total disaster. We all laugh about it later, but I can't shake the feeling that I ruined everything. I spend the rest of the weekend in a haze, trying to make up for my food disaster by organizing everything else, like starting the fire, setting up games, and making sure everyone has enough drinks, but the damage is done. The whole trip ended up being great, and we still had a blast. But I learned an important lesson. Sometimes, being responsible doesn't mean you can control everything, and sometimes, it's better to let someone else take the reins. I'm just thankful my friends were kind enough to not absolutely roast me over the worst pasta ever made.
So yeah.
That was my fuck up. Maybe I'll just leave the food planning to someone else next time. I never thought I'd be the guy who causes a scene in public, but I guess there's a first time for everything. And, of course, it had to happen on a flight. You know those moments in life when you wish you could just disappear? This was one of those moments. It all started innocently enough. I was on my way to a business trip, something routine, just another flight for work, a few meetings, a little networking, and then back home. I'm not exactly a nervous flyer, but I do have my quirks. I like to get to the airport early, grab a coffee, and settle into my seat with a good book. I'm usually the kind of guy who keeps to himself, doesn't make a fuss, and always avoids eye contact with anyone who might try to engage in conversation. So, when I boarded the flight, I thought nothing of it. I was assigned a middle seat, which wasn't ideal, but I figured I'd just power through it. As I settled in, I noticed a woman sitting next to me. She was probably in her mid-30s, wearing a sweater, jeans, and a scarf that looked way too fancy for the 9 a.m. flight. She had this air of confidence about her, the kind of person who knows exactly how to navigate the world and isn't fazed by anything. I, on the other hand, was just trying to mind my business and not spill my coffee all over myself. The plane took off without incident, and I managed to read a few chapters of my book. Everything was calm, peaceful. That is, until I noticed the woman next to me was acting a little strange. First, she kept glancing at me every few seconds, as if she was trying to figure something out. I thought maybe I had something on my face, or maybe I was unknowingly doing something weird, but then I just chalked it up to her being one of those people who's overly aware of their surroundings. But then came the moment when she actually spoke to me. "Excuse me," she said, her voice a little shaky. I looked up, and she was staring at me, her eyebrows furrowed. "Are you okay?" she asked. I was confused. "Yeah, I'm fine." "Why?" Her gaze was intense, and I could see a hint of concern in her eyes. "You're shaking. Are you nervous about flying? I wasn't shaking at all, but I felt a sudden rush of self-consciousness. Now, I was starting to feel like I was doing something wrong. I looked at my hands and realized they were trembling slightly. It wasn't much, but I was holding onto the armrest a little too tight. I tried to shrug it off, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized she might be right. I wasn't nervous about flying, but I was anxious about the upcoming meeting, about the work I had to do, about whether I was making the right impression with my boss and clients. But I couldn't exactly admit that to a stranger. No, I'm good, I said, trying to brush it off. Just a little tired. She didn't seem convinced. Okay, well, if you need anything, I'm here, she said, her tone softening. I smiled politely, but I was still a little thrown off. I tried to refocus on my book, hoping the awkward moment would pass. But it didn't. She kept glancing at me, and I started to feel more and more uncomfortable. I could feel my heart racing a little, not because I was nervous, but because I was hyper-aware of her staring at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. And then it happened. She leaned in closer, so close that I could feel her breath on my arm, and whispered, "Are you sure you're okay? I think you might need help." At this point, I was panicking. I didn't want to draw attention to myself, but she was making me feel like I was about to collapse or do something embarrassing. I needed to get her to stop talking to me, but I didn't want to be rude. Before I could come up with a response, the flight attendant came by. She was tall, blonde, and all business. "Can I get you anything to drink, sir?" she asked. I nodded, desperate for some distraction. "Yeah, just a coffee. Black, please." The flight attendant went off to get my drink, and I sighed in relief. But the woman next to me didn't let up. "I think you should really see someone," she said, still in that soft voice, like I was about to have a panic attack or something. "It's really important to take care of your mental health." I couldn't believe it. Here I was, just trying to enjoy my flight, and this woman was making it her mission to diagnose me. "Look," I said, trying to sound more firm, "I'm fine. I don't need any help. Thank you." She paused for a moment, studying me, then gave me a sympathetic smile, like she knew better than I did what I needed. But I was done. I wasn't going to let this go on any longer. Just as I was about to turn away and resume reading, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. It was an email from my boss, something about last-minute changes to the schedule for the meeting. I read through it quickly, trying to process the new information. My hands were shaking even more now, but I was determined to stay composed. I quickly typed a response to my boss, trying to sound confident, but the whole situation was starting to feel like too much. I felt the woman's gaze on me again, and this time, it wasn't subtle. She was staring at me, watching me type, looking like she was trying to figure something out. I looked up at her, finally reaching the breaking point. "What is your deal?" I asked, my voice a little louder than I intended. She blinked, clearly taken aback by my sudden outburst. "I'm just trying to help you," she said defensively. "You don't have to be so rude." "I'm not rude," I snapped. "You're just making me feel weird." The flight attendant came back just then with my coffee, and I could see she was aware of the tension. "Everything okay, sir?" she asked, looking between the two of us. I didn't even know how to respond. I just grabbed the coffee and muttered, "Yeah, everything's fine." The woman next to me said nothing more, but I could feel her eyes on me for the rest of the flight. Every time I glanced over, she was watching me. I was practically vibrating with anxiety by the time we landed. I quickly grabbed my bag as soon as we touched down, eager to get off the plane and away from her. But as I was exiting the plane, I heard her call out to me. "Take care of yourself," she said loudly. "You really should seek help." I almost wanted to turn around and scream, "I don't need your help," but I held my tongue. I was already walking too fast to stop. I'm pretty sure I'm still not over the embarrassment of the whole situation. I know she meant well, but I really don't think she had any right to make me feel like I was losing control in front of an entire plane of people. And honestly, I don't think I'll ever be able to fly without wondering if someone else is watching me like I'm some kind of ticking time bomb. So yeah, TIFU by making an awkward situation even worse with a woman who tried to diagnose me mid-flight. I'm just glad I never have to see her again. So I had this idea. I'm not sure why, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. It all started a few weeks ago when I got a message on my phone from my old college buddy, Evan. Evan and I went to school together and stayed in touch over the years, but our friendship had mostly consisted of a few random texts and social media comments. He'd sent me a message saying, "Hey man, I have a surprise for you. I've got tickets to this exclusive event tonight. You in?" I had no idea what this event was, but Evan had always been into weird and obscure things, so I figured it'd be some kind of underground rave or a weird art show. Either way, it sounded fun. I had nothing else planned, so I texted back, "Sure, count me in." He replied with the details, "Meet me at the old warehouse on 5th Street at 8 p.m. Now, at this point, I'm not thinking twice. I grab my jacket, head out, and get to the location a bit early. It was an industrial area, and the place looked abandoned. No lights, no sign of life, nothing that screamed, exclusive event. I stood around for about 10 minutes wondering if I had been scammed, but then I saw Evan coming around the corner, grinning from ear to ear. He looked excited, but there was something off about his smile. Like he knew something I didn't. "Hey man, you made it," he said, giving me a hug. "You're not going to believe what's inside. It's going to blow your mind." I followed him through a creaky door that led into a massive room. There was no fancy decor, no decorations, just a few mismatched tables and chairs scattered around. The place smelled like a mix of old leather, dust, and stale beer. But the thing that really caught my attention was the people. There were maybe 20 to 30 people there, all sitting around in a circle. Some were in their late 20s, others in their 30s, but most of them were just chilling, talking quietly, not doing much. Then Evan led me to an empty seat and introduced me to the guy sitting next to me, who looked like he'd seen better days. His hair was messy, his clothes were wrinkled, and his eyes had a certain glazed look to them, like he hadn't slept in days. "This is Brian," Evan said with a weird enthusiasm. "He's one of the main guys who runs this." Brian smiled weakly and gave me a handshake, but didn't say much. I had no clue what I had gotten myself into. Evan then leaned in and whispered, "This is it, man. The thing we've been waiting for. It's a full-on experience. You're going to feel like you're in another world. Trust me." I was starting to feel uneasy, but I didn't want to look like a buzzkill in front of Evan. I glanced around again, trying to gauge if this was just some odd social gathering, but everyone seemed oddly calm and sedated. It was just weird. The silence in the room was broken when Brian stood up and clapped his hands loudly. "All right, everyone, it's time," he said in a slow, deliberate tone. People started moving, getting up, and heading toward a table at the back of the room that had various objects lined up on it. Evan grabbed my arm and led me to the table. On it were a bunch of strange-looking items: incense, crystals, jars filled with some kind of herbs, and several small bowls filled with an assortment of liquids. I stared at the stuff, still unsure what was going on. "Don't worry," Evan said with a smile. "This is going to be incredible. You've just got to trust me." I stood there for a second, hesitating. This wasn't what I had expected, but I didn't want to look lame, so I just nodded and went along with it. A man in a long robe walked over to the table and started explaining the items. "These," he said, pointing to the jars, "are the key to unlocking the experience. Each one is a different flavor of sensory enhancement. If you want to see the world like you've never seen it before, you need to taste them all." My heart skipped a beat. "Taste them?" I asked. The man gave me a slow, intense nod. "Yes, taste them. It's part of the ritual." At this point, I was seriously considering leaving. But Evan looked so eager, so excited, and I didn't want to disappoint him. So I went along with it. The first bowl I was handed contained a thick liquid that smelled like burnt sugar mixed with something herbal. "Go ahead," the man urged. "Take a sip. It'll open your mind." I took a small sip, and almost immediately, a wave of dizziness hit me. The room started spinning and my vision blurred. I gripped the table to steady myself, trying not to freak out. "This is normal," the man said calmly. "Just let the experience take you." The next thing I knew, everything around me started to change. The walls seemed to bend and warp like they were made of rubber. The people around me were suddenly moving in slow motion, their faces becoming distorted, like they were melting. I could feel my pulse quicken as panic set in. What the hell was happening? Was this some kind of drug? A prank? My heart was racing as I looked around in a panic. I felt trapped in this bizarre, distorted version of reality. Evan was still smiling, but his grin was stretched unnaturally wide, and I could see that his eyes were gleaming with excitement. "Isn't it amazing?" he asked, his voice warbling, as if he were miles away. "This is what I've been telling you about. It's like nothing else, man." I couldn't speak. I felt paralyzed, unable to move or even process what was happening. It felt like I was on the edge of some insane trip that I had no control over. Eventually, I managed to get to my feet, stumbling toward the door. I needed to get out of there. I couldn't stand the surreal nightmare I was trapped in. As I stumbled into the hallway, everything started to come back to reality. The walls stopped warping, the people stopped melting, and I found myself gasping for air. I was drenched in sweat, my heart still racing, but I was alive. I had no idea what the hell just happened. I sat on the cold concrete floor of the hallway, trying to gather myself. My hands were shaking, my mind was a jumbled mess. I couldn't even remember how long I had been in that room. Evan eventually found me, looking concerned. "Hey man, you alright?" he asked, his voice unusually calm. I nodded, still unable to speak. "You just need to relax. It's a lot to take in, but once you get used to it, you'll see the world differently. Trust me." I didn't know what to say. I just wanted to go home, but somehow I didn't want to offend Evan. "I think I need to go," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Evan just smiled, his eyes still wide with excitement.
No worries, man.
"Take your time. We'll do this again sometime." I stumbled out of there as quickly as I could, making my way to my car. When I got home, I locked all the doors and just collapsed on the couch, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I still don't know what the hell that event was, and I haven't talked to Evan since. He sent me a text later that night, but I couldn't bring myself to reply. I don't know if it was some kind of cult or just a weird drug experience, but I'm not going back. I've learned my lesson. Some invitations are better left ignored. Hey, friends! If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. TIFU by accidentally sending my boss an explicit photo meant for my girlfriend. This all started last week when I was at work, deep into a project that was due the following day. It was one of those days where everything felt like it was going wrong. I'd been staying late at the office, trying to get things done so I could finally leave, but nothing was working. The deadline was creeping closer, and I was feeling the pressure. At the same time, I was getting increasingly frustrated, and I decided I needed a break to clear my head. I texted my girlfriend, who had been messaging me earlier about how much she missed me. I had a few quick texts back and forth with her before I got a message that she sent a photo of herself in lingerie. Honestly, it was a little unexpected, but not unwelcome. We'd been together for a while, and things were going great. So I decided to send her a little something back to show her I was thinking of her. Now, here's where things went terribly wrong. In my work office, I had multiple apps open on my phone: Slack for work messages, Outlook for emails, and iMessage for personal stuff. I had to step away from my desk to take a quick call, but I was still thinking about the photo I wanted to send. I figured I'd snap a quick one in the bathroom, send it, and then focus back on the pile of work I had left. My phone was already out from texting her, so I just tossed it on the counter while I got ready. I didn't think to lock my screen or close any apps. Big mistake. The bathroom is right next to my office, so I quickly walked in, snapped the photo, and sent it off. I felt a sense of relief as I sat back down at my desk, ready to get back into work. But when I checked my phone again, I saw a notification from Slack, which I had left open while I was distracted. There was a message from my boss, who had just replied to something I'd sent earlier in the day. I swiped to reply and, in my distracted state, accidentally opened the wrong thread. I didn't even notice it right away, but the thread I had opened was not with my girlfriend. It was with my boss. The message I had just sent was the explicit photo meant for her. For a solid 30 seconds, I froze, staring at the screen in horror. I quickly scrambled to delete the message, but of course, it was too late. My boss had already read it. I had no idea how to respond. My heart was pounding in my chest. What the hell was I supposed to say? I'd just sent an inappropriate photo to my boss, and not just any boss. This was a high-ranking VP at the company. This was bad. Really bad. At this point, I went into full panic mode. I couldn't breathe. I quickly clicked on the thread, frantically typing, "I'm so sorry. That wasn't meant for you. It was for my girlfriend." I hit send, but I knew that wasn't going to cut it. This wasn't something I could just apologize for and forget. My boss had seen it. He knew what I looked like, and now he had a visual reminder that I was, at that moment, an idiot. A few minutes later, I got a response. It wasn't as bad as I feared, but it was still bad. "I think we need to have a conversation. Please come to my office in 10 minutes. I didn't know what to do. I started to second-guess everything. What if I was fired? What if this ruined my career? What if this was the end of everything I'd worked for? I sat there, frozen in complete shock. I knew I had to go talk to him. There was no way around it. I quickly tried to fix my appearance, combing my hair, fixing my shirt, trying to make myself presentable. I wanted to be anywhere but in that office, but I had no choice. I stood up, walked to the door, and made my way down the hall to his office. When I arrived, my boss was sitting behind his desk, looking very serious. He gestured for me to sit down, and I did, still feeling like I was going to pass out. The air between us felt thick, like everything I said from that point would be the wrong thing. "What happened?" he asked, folding his arms across his chest. I felt the blood rush to my face. I sent you a photo by mistake. It wasn't meant for you, it was meant for my girlfriend." There was a long pause. I swear, time stood still. I could barely breathe.
He sighed.
"Look, I'm going to level with you. I don't know what possessed you to do that, but you need to understand that this is very unprofessional. This is a serious violation of workplace conduct. We're lucky I'm not filing a formal complaint, but I can't just pretend like it didn't happen." My heart sank. "I'm so sorry. I swear it won't happen again." He looked at me for a moment, almost like he was considering something. "You're not going to lose your job. But I think it's time we have a talk about boundaries. Professionalism matters, and this was a big lapse in judgment." I nodded vigorously, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I couldn't believe what I had done. I thought about the text thread with my girlfriend, how we'd been joking around and being playful. But I had taken it too far, and now it was hanging over my head. "I understand," I said, my voice barely a whisper. We talked for a few more minutes. He told me that, while he wasn't going to report the incident, it was a warning. I had crossed a line, and I needed to be more mindful of my actions. I apologized again, and then I left his office, feeling both relieved and deeply embarrassed. The rest of the day was a blur. I couldn't focus on my work. I was replaying the whole situation over and over in my head, wondering how I was ever going to live this down. What if my coworkers found out? What if they were all laughing behind my back? The next few days were incredibly awkward. My boss was polite, but distant. We didn't talk much, and I could tell he was still processing the whole thing. As for me, I was constantly paranoid about everything I did, worried that one small mistake might cost me my job. It was a rough week, but eventually, the tension seemed to fade. My boss didn't bring it up again, and I tried my best to move forward. As for my girlfriend, she thought it was hilarious. She reassured me that she was totally fine, and that it was just a funny mistake. But for me, it was a lesson in never mixing work and personal life. Ever. I'll be more careful from now on. My career is too important to let something like this derail it. So yeah. TIFU by sending my boss an explicit photo meant for my girlfriend. Never thought that would be the kind of lesson I'd learn the hard way, but here we are. It was a typical Saturday afternoon, and I had the whole day planned out. My friends and I had been talking about hiking up this trail that we had been wanting to explore for months. The weather was perfect, the sun was shining, and the promise of a new adventure made the day feel like it was going to be one to remember. I had everything packed: snacks, water, sunscreen, and a solid playlist ready to go. All I needed was to meet up with the gang and hit the road. I arrived at the meeting spot first, which was a small cafe near the trailhead. I'd never been there before, but the place had a cozy, rustic vibe to it, and the smell of coffee wafting through the air made me feel like I was in the right place. I ordered a coffee, sat down, and opened my phone to check the group chat. As expected, my friends were running late.
Typical.
I wasn't too bothered, though. I had some time to kill, and this gave me a chance to mentally prepare for the hike ahead. About 30 minutes later, my friends rolled in. There was Emily, the overly prepared one who had packed enough gear for a week-long survival trip, even though the hike would take maybe 3 hours. Then came Jack and Sarah, who showed up laughing, clearly already having a good time. We all exchanged pleasantries, had some small talk, and finally, after what felt like an eternity of nonsense, we set out for the trailhead. Now, the trail we were tackling wasn't a particularly difficult one. It was listed as moderate online, which meant it was challenging enough to be fun, but not so difficult that we'd be dragging ourselves to the finish. I figured we'd be in for a bit of a workout, but nothing that would leave us broken and bruised. Little did I know, my day was about to take a sharp turn into chaos. As we started our ascent, the chatter began to fade as the effort of the climb took hold. We were about a mile in when Sarah stopped to take a photo. This was the perfect time for Emily to do one of her infamous gear checks. It's a thing she does where she stops every 15 minutes to make sure she has everything just in case. She asked if anyone wanted a snack and offered me some trail mix. I declined, not because I didn't want it, but because I had eaten a massive breakfast and wasn't feeling particularly hungry. That's when it happened. I felt a strange, almost imperceptible twinge in my stomach. Nothing major, just a slight discomfort that I figured was normal for being a mile into a hike. I ignored it, but then, within a few minutes, the discomfort grew sharper. I figure it was just a cramp, so I kept walking, pushing through the discomfort. By the time we hit the 2-mile mark, things were getting worse. It wasn't a cramp anymore, it was full-blown stomach pain. I stopped and tried to stretch, hoping it would pass. Emily, always the observant one, asked if I was okay. I assured her I was fine, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to hide how miserable I felt. I told the group I'd take a short break and sit for a bit, hoping the pain would subside. They agreed to keep going while I rested. I sat on a rock and tried to breathe through the pain, hoping it was just a temporary issue. After about 10 minutes, the pain didn't go away. In fact, it got worse. It felt like my stomach was being twisted from the inside. Maybe I ate something bad, I thought to myself. Maybe I'm just dehydrated. I stood up, trying to ignore it, but I couldn't. The pain was getting unbearable. I knew this wasn't just a stomach cramp anymore. This was something worse. I decided it was time to turn back, but as I made my way down the trail, it quickly became clear that I wasn't going to make it. I turned to head back down, but the pain was so intense that I had to stop every few feet. And then it hit me. The thing I'd been dreading. I suddenly had the unmistakable feeling of needing to go to the bathroom, but it wasn't just a simple bathroom break. It was urgent, it was immediate, and it was terrifying. I panicked. I looked around, but there were no bathrooms anywhere. No rest stops. Just wilderness. I tried to push through it. Maybe I can hold it, I thought. But the seconds turned into minutes, and the urge kept growing, making me feel like I was about to explode. My options were slim. Either I could try to make it back to the trailhead, which was still a mile away, or I could find some sort of makeshift solution.
And fast.
I looked around. The only thing I could see was a dense area of trees and bushes. The panic was real now. I didn't have much time to think, so I made the call. I quickly ducked into the foliage, hoping no one would see me, and started the most awkward, humbling process of trying to relieve myself in the woods. But of course, as I'm halfway through, it happened. One of my friends, Jack, had circled back to check on me. I heard him call my name from the trail, and in a complete panic, I froze. Not only had I already lost all dignity in the moment, but now my friend was standing there, unaware of the catastrophic situation I was in. "Hey, you good?" Jack called out, walking closer. I wanted to scream at him to turn around and leave, but it was too late.
He saw me.
He saw everything. I've never been more embarrassed in my life. There I was, squatting behind a tree, pants down, and Jack standing just a few feet away, trying to process what he had just witnessed. His face was a mix of horror and confusion. He stood there in stunned silence for what felt like an eternity before I managed to stammer out something that might resemble an explanation. I couldn't make it, man. I didn't want to. I trailed off, realizing how absurd everything sounded. Without saying much, Jack turned around and walked back down the trail, still trying to make sense of what he had just seen. I quickly finished, pulled myself together, and somehow made it back to the trailhead with minimal further incident. When I finally rejoined the group, I could tell they had been talking about what happened. Emily was trying to hide her grin, Sarah was barely containing her laughter, and Jack. Well, Jack looked like he had seen a ghost. The rest of the hike was awkward. Every time Jack would glance at me, I would feel my cheeks flush with embarrassment. It was a good thing that the rest of the hike was uneventful. The rest of the day passed with me trying to act like everything was normal, but in the back of my mind, I knew my friends would never let me live that down. And sure enough, they didn't. Every single time we go on a hike together now, the story of the great bathroom incident comes up, and I have to relive the humiliation all over again. So, yeah, that was my TIFU. I thought it was going to be a fun day out with friends, but it ended up being a reminder that nature has a way of humbling you when you least expect it. I still don't know how it all went so wrong. It started as just a normal Saturday morning, one of those weekends where you don't have any plans, so you sleep in a little and just enjoy the quiet. I'd been in a bit of a funk lately, dealing with work stress and a whole bunch of things going on in my personal life. But that day, I was determined to do something to break the cycle. So I thought, why not clean the apartment and get some fresh air by going for a walk? Simple, right?
Wrong.
It was around 10:30 a.m. when I woke up, and my place was an absolute mess. Clothes scattered everywhere, dishes piled up in the sink, and, for some reason, a mountain of unopened mail on the coffee table. I groaned and pushed myself out of bed. The weather outside was cloudy but warm enough to feel nice, so I figured I'd clean up and then treat myself to a coffee at my favorite local cafe. I wasn't expecting anything exciting to happen. In fact, I was hoping for an uneventful day. So I got to work. I started in the kitchen, cleaning up dishes and wiping down counters. It was one of those tasks that always feels a bit more rewarding than it should. As I scrubbed away, I thought about how nice it would be to just have everything in order. Maybe I'd even binge-watch some Netflix later. I finished up the kitchen and moved on to the living room. That's when things started to go south. My couch had a couple of throw pillows that I'd been meaning to rearrange, and as I was doing that, I noticed something weird on the floor under the coffee table, a small black object. I bent down to pick it up, thinking it was just some junk that had slipped between the cracks, but when I grabbed it, I realized it wasn't junk at all. It was a small, unmarked black box with a button on the side. My first thought was that it was some sort of weird gadget I had forgotten about. But as I turned it over, I saw a label on the bottom that read, "Property of the City of New York. For emergency use only." Now, my first reaction was to panic. I had no idea what this was or where it came from. But I figured it was probably some kind of emergency device that had been left behind by a previous tenant. I didn't live in New York anymore, so I couldn't imagine how it ended up in my apartment, but it wasn't like I had much of a choice. I had to figure out what this thing did. I stood there for a moment, staring at the button, unsure of what to do. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pressed it. Nothing happened. For a second, I thought maybe it was just a dud, and I was overreacting. But then I heard a low beeping sound coming from the device. It was quiet at first, but it slowly grew louder. I froze, my heart racing as I tried to figure out what was going on. Was it some kind of silent alarm? A bomb? A tracking device? My mind was racing through 1,000 worst-case scenarios. The beeping continued, and I heard a sound from outside my apartment, distant, but growing louder. I looked out the window, and that's when I saw it. A black van, parked across the street. The windows were tinted, and I could barely make out the silhouette of someone inside. My pulse started to race as I tried to make sense of the situation. What in the world was going on? I tried pressing the button again, but nothing changed. The beeping just got louder and more insistent. My apartment suddenly felt a lot smaller, the walls closing in as I started to panic. I wasn't prepared for whatever this was. I wasn't prepared to have some emergency government device in my apartment, especially when it seemed like someone was monitoring me. I grabbed my phone and called the police, though I wasn't even sure what to say. Hi, I think I might have accidentally activated some kind of emergency device that's connected to a black van outside my apartment. I was certain I sounded completely insane, but I didn't know who else to call. The 911 operator asked me to stay on the line, and after a few minutes, they promised someone would come to check it out. I went to my front door and peered through the peephole. The black van was still there, and now, two men in dark suits were standing outside, looking up at my building. It felt like something straight out of a movie, but it was all too real. When the police finally arrived, they knocked on my door. I opened it, and they immediately asked if I'd been near any suspicious devices or anything unusual lately. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to explain the weird black box. I led them into the living room, where the device was still emitting its persistent beeping. They immediately tensed up when they saw it. One of the officers reached for his radio and whispered something into it. The other officer looked at me with a mix of concern and suspicion. "We're going to need you to step outside, sir," one of them said. "Do you have any idea what that is?" "Honestly, no. I just found it under my couch," I explained, still in shock. The officers didn't seem convinced, and they kept glancing at each other. I was ushered outside and into a police car, and we waited as a bomb squad showed up. At this point, I was utterly confused, thinking I had stumbled into some serious government conspiracy, or maybe I had triggered some high-level security alarm without even realizing it. The officers seemed tight-lipped, and I could barely hear their radio chatter. Eventually, after what felt like hours of waiting, the bomb squad confirmed that the device wasn't an actual bomb. It was, in fact, some sort of high-tech emergency communication device. Apparently, it had been accidentally left behind by some sort of government contractor, and they were investigating how it had ended up in my apartment. As it turned out, it was part of a larger, classified system meant for rapid communication during disasters. But none of that explained why it had been left in my living room or how it had ended up in the first place. I was allowed to go back inside, but the situation was still far from normal. My apartment was now a crime scene, with officers taking photographs and inventory of everything in sight. I couldn't believe it. A simple cleaning session had somehow turned into an hours-long ordeal with bomb squads, government agents, and a very confused apartment resident. The next few days were a blur of interviews, questions, and vague answers. I had to give a statement to the local police, who assured me that they were investigating how the device had ended up in my possession. The black van outside my apartment was, apparently, linked to a private contractor involved with emergency response systems. How it ended up at my place was still a mystery. In the end, I never did get a real answer to what happened, but I learned a valuable lesson that day. Sometimes, it's better not to press buttons you find lying around your apartment, especially when they're labeled for emergency use only. And if you ever find yourself in a similar situation, make sure you've got an emergency contact list that doesn't involve government agencies, because trust me, you don't want them showing up at your door. But yeah, that's the time I accidentally triggered an emergency device and ended up having a bomb squad at my place. All because I was trying to clean my apartment. Safe to say, I'll be a lot more careful with what I find next time. TIFU by trying to impress my boss with a big presentation and completely sabotaging myself in the process. So, let me set the stage. I've been working at this company for about 2 years now. It's a mid-sized tech firm that deals with some pretty advanced software solutions. My boss, Greg, is a no-nonsense kind of guy who really values results and efficiency. He's the type to give you a 10-minute speech about how he doesn't like meetings, but if you do something impressive, he'll let you go home early for the day. I've always admired him for his no-BS attitude and dedication, which is why I wanted to do something special for our next big project meeting. I thought I'd finally get his attention and maybe, just maybe, get that promotion I've been eyeing. The project I was working on was a presentation that showcased the latest software update our team had developed. It was a huge deal for the company because it was designed to revolutionize how we interact with clients and analyze user data. All the higher-ups were going to be there, including Greg, and the last thing I wanted was to come off as unprepared or, worse, uninspiring. I had spent weeks preparing. I pulled data from every corner of the project, created sleek infographics, designed stunning slides with the most visually engaging animations, and rehearsed my delivery until I had it down to a science. The night before the presentation, I stayed up late tweaking minor details and reviewing my slides for the umpteenth time. I was feeling pretty damn confident. This was going to be my moment. The next morning, I arrive at the office and walk straight into the conference room where the meeting is going to be held. My heart is pounding, but I remind myself that this is what I've been working for. The room is still empty, and I take the opportunity to quickly plug in my laptop and test the projector. Everything looks good, and I take a seat at the front, waiting for the other team members to arrive. At this point, Greg walks in, along with a few other senior staff members. I feel the pressure ramp up, but I remind myself that I've prepared for this. Greg nods at me, acknowledging my presence, and takes his seat. A few moments later, the presentation begins. I start confidently, walking through the first few slides, detailing the technical features of the software. My audience seems engaged, nodding along, and I feel a rush of adrenaline. Greg is sitting directly in front of me, his face a mix of skepticism and curiosity, which only motivates me to push forward even harder. Then it happens. I click to the next slide, and something strange happens. The animation I had so carefully designed freezes. The slide doesn't load properly, and the fancy graphs that were supposed to pop up like a smooth transition instead appear in glitchy, jagged lines. The audience shifts in their seats awkwardly. I try to click again, hoping it's just a glitch, but instead, the entire presentation software crashes. Everything on my laptop goes black. I freeze. The room is silent. I stare at my laptop screen, trying to make sense of what just happened. The seconds feel like hours. My palms are sweaty, my mouth is dry, and I can feel my heart beating in my ears. I quickly close the laptop and try to salvage the situation by plugging in a backup thumb drive I'd brought with me, praying that it has the correct version of the presentation. But when I try to open the file, it refuses to load. Apparently, the backup was corrupted too. I look up at the team, and I can feel every pair of eyes on me. Greg's expression has shifted from curiosity to thinly veiled disappointment. The other team members are shifting uncomfortably in their seats, trying to pretend like they're not noticing how badly I'm failing right now. At this point, I decide to do the only thing I can think of. Wing it. I start talking. I try to explain the software's features, the user experience, and the technical specs off the top of my head. But as I talk, I can feel myself spiraling. My sentences are becoming disjointed. I'm repeating myself, and I'm sweating like a marathon runner in the middle of the desert. At one point, I even start describing a feature that isn't in the update at all, just to fill the silence. My brain is desperately trying to remember what's in the update and what I'd planned to say, but everything is blending together in a haze of panic. Greg doesn't help. He leans back in his chair, arms crossed, and sighs loudly. The others don't dare make eye contact with me. I've completely lost them. I can't even hear the words coming out of my mouth anymore. It's just a mess of technical jargon and awkward pauses. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, Greg speaks up. He says, "I think we've seen enough." The room goes silent again, and I realize that the presentation is effectively over. The last shred of my professional dignity evaporates as Greg stands up, adjusts his jacket, and walks out of the room. The others follow him, one by one, leaving me standing there in the middle of the room, alone and humiliated. I sit there for a long moment, staring at the empty chair where Greg had been sitting. I feel like my entire career is crashing down around me. Not only had I failed to impress him, but I'd also managed to crash my laptop, ruin the presentation, and make a complete fool of myself in front of my colleagues. That day, I had to go back to my desk and send out an email to the team apologizing for the disaster. It wasn't pretty. Greg replied with a short, "We'll discuss this later," which sent me into a whole new spiral of anxiety. For the next week, every time I walked into the office, I felt like people were avoiding me. I was certain my career was over. A few days after the fiasco, Greg called me into his office. I was sure I was about to get fired, but instead, he just stared at me for a few seconds before speaking. Listen, I know you were trying to do something impressive. But next time, just keep it simple. I don't need a fancy presentation. I need results. Show me you can deliver, and we'll go from there. I don't think I'd ever felt more relieved in my entire life. The pressure was still there, of course, but at least I wasn't out of a job. Looking back, it was the worst presentation I've ever done. But it also taught me an important lesson. Sometimes, trying too hard to impress someone can backfire in the worst way. Greg didn't need flashy animations or complicated slides. He just needed the facts. And if I want to move forward in my career, I need to focus on delivering those facts clearly and efficiently, not on wowing people with unnecessary flourishes. So yeah, I may have completely sabotaged myself in front of my boss, but I think I learned something valuable from the experience. Maybe next time, I'll just keep it simple. So I was at a wedding this past weekend. It was the wedding of a close friend from college, someone I had known for years, and I was excited to be there. The ceremony was beautiful, the couple was glowing, and the reception was going great. I had a few drinks in me, but nothing crazy, just a couple of beers to get into the celebratory mood. The usual. Anyway, the wedding was held at a fancy outdoor venue. The area was gorgeous, with string lights hanging from the trees, and everything felt very elegant and romantic. The guests were all dressed to the nines, and the whole thing felt like something out of a movie. The music was good, the food was even better, and I was in high spirits. At some point in the night, I started talking to this girl. Let's call her Sarah. I didn't know Sarah very well. I had seen her around before because she was a friend of the bride, but we had never really talked much. That night, however, we clicked instantly. We had some shared interests, and the conversation was flowing pretty smoothly. She was funny, kind, and easy to talk to, so naturally, I got more comfortable around her as the night went on. We were joking about how ridiculously expensive the wine was and how overpriced the appetizers were, even though they were delicious. By the time the first dance was done and everyone had a couple more drinks, Sarah and I were getting along really well. Around midnight, the dancing started to pick up. The DJ was playing some good music, and everyone was dancing like they didn't care who was watching. I'm not a huge dancer, but the atmosphere was fun, so I joined in. Sarah and I danced a couple of songs together, and we laughed about how neither of us had any rhythm. It was one of those carefree, feel-good moments where everything was just right. Then, a few songs later, I decided it was time for a break. I needed to grab another drink and cool down a bit. I made my way over to the bar, and as I was waiting in line, I noticed Sarah was standing by the drink table, talking to a group of people. I waved at her, and she waved back, so I felt like it was a good time to head over. But before I could, something strange happened. A guy, someone I didn't recognize, approached me from behind. He tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey man, are you here with Sarah?" I turned around, confused.
Yeah.
She's a friend of mine.
Why?
The guy looked at me with a weird mix of concern and anger. "You might want to watch yourself, dude," he said, then turned and walked away without giving me a chance to respond. I stood there for a moment, completely dumbfounded. What the hell was that about? Who was this guy? Why would he warn me about Sarah? I glanced over at her, and she was still talking to the group of people by the drink table. At that point, my mind started racing. I tried to brush it off, but the guy's words stuck with me. What did he mean by watch yourself? I figured he must have been some overprotective friend or maybe some guy who had a thing for Sarah, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I walked back to the dance floor to distract myself. I tried to focus on the music and the people around me, but I couldn't get the interaction with that guy out of my head. A few minutes later, I went back to the bar to grab that drink I had originally come for. As I was waiting for the bartender, I felt someone tap me on the shoulder again. I turned around, and this time it was Sarah. She had a big smile on her face, and I was relieved to see her, but my anxiety from earlier was still eating at me. "Hey," she said, still smiling. "You were great on the dance floor. I'm glad we finally got to hang out tonight." I smiled back, trying to keep things casual. "Yeah, this has been a lot of fun." Then, Sarah suddenly looked at me with a slightly more serious expression. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay. Some guy came up to me earlier and told me that you were, I don't know, acting weird? He said something about me being a danger to you." I froze.
What?
That was the exact same guy who had approached me earlier. Wait, what? I said, my voice betraying how confused and panicked I was. That guy. I don't even know him. He just came up to me out of nowhere and warned me to watch myself. Sarah's face turned a little pale. That's weird. I don't know who that guy is, but I'm telling you, I haven't been with anyone tonight except my friends. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. Before I could respond, the bartender handed me my drink, and I quickly took it and chugged it down, hoping it would calm my nerves. My mind was spinning. Was there something going on that I wasn't understanding? Why was this random guy acting like he knew something about Sarah and me? Just then, as I was starting to feel more uneasy, Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket. She checked it, and her expression changed again, this time to pure shock. Okay, this is really strange, she said, looking at me, her face paling. I just got a text from a number I don't recognize, and it's a photo of you from earlier, when we were dancing. It says, "Watch out for this one. He's trouble." I stared at her. My heart sank. What in the world was going on? Before I could ask her anything else, Sarah stepped back. I need to find the bride. I need to find out what's going on. She turned and quickly walked off, leaving me standing there with my drink in hand, absolutely floored by what had just happened. I spent the next few minutes trying to process everything. The whole situation felt like a bizarre, twisted misunderstanding. But the more I thought about it, the more it started to feel like I was caught in some kind of weird drama that I had no part in. It felt like someone was trying to ruin my night. After Sarah left, I went to the bathroom to clear my head. When I came back, I saw Sarah talking to the groom. There was something tense in the air, and I noticed the groom kept looking at me and then back at Sarah. She wasn't smiling anymore. Long story short, after all that, it turned out that the guy who had been sending me weird messages had been an ex of Sarah's, and apparently, he had some seriously distorted ideas about their relationship. He thought Sarah was cheating on him or whatever, and for some reason, he decided that I was the enemy. The whole thing was one giant, awkward misunderstanding, but by the end of the night, I was left feeling embarrassed, confused, and honestly a little bit freaked out. I hadn't done anything wrong, but this random guy had managed to make me feel like I was in the middle of some chaotic love triangle. To make matters worse, I had to leave early because the groom, who was one of my closest friends, told me that Sarah's ex was making things weird, and I shouldn't stick around in case he caused more trouble.
So yeah,
That was my weekend. A complete mess of drama, weird accusations, and a wedding I'll never forget for all the wrong reasons. I just hope Sarah's ex stays out of my life. I've never been a fan of public transportation. It's not that I'm a germaphobe, but the idea of being packed into a moving metal box with dozens of strangers always felt a little too claustrophobic for me. But recently, I had to take the bus every day for a week because my car was in the shop. I knew I was in for a rough time, but nothing could prepare me for what happened on the final day of my public transit adventure. It was Friday morning, and I had a meeting in the city center. I got up early, grabbed a quick breakfast, and left my apartment with just enough time to catch the bus. I didn't expect the usual Friday rush, people scrambling to get to work, trying to secure a seat, the chaos of everyone rushing out the door at the same time. It was just another normal bus ride, or so I thought. I boarded the bus, squeezed my way past a group of teenagers who were playing loud music through their headphones and sitting in the aisle seats, and found a spot near the back. I stood there, gripping the pole with one hand and trying not to make eye contact with anyone. The bus lurched forward, and I silently cursed myself for not grabbing a seat earlier. As the bus made its way through the usual route, I couldn't help but notice a strange smell. It wasn't overpowering, but it was definitely there, something sour mixed with a faint scent of body odor. I looked around, trying to figure out where it was coming from. The guy sitting across from me was wearing a black hoodie and headphones, but there was no way it could be him. He seemed pretty clean. The bus stopped at the next station, and the doors opened. A new passenger stepped on, and as soon as the door closed behind them, the smell intensified. It was worse than I thought. It was almost like a mixture of wet dog and stale food. I looked over at the person who had just entered, a middle-aged man with a heavy coat and unkempt hair. He didn't look homeless, but something about him screamed, "I haven't showered in a while." I tried to ignore it, shifting a little in my spot to get a bit of fresh air. But no matter how much I shifted, the smell was sticking to me like a layer of grime. And then it happened. The man, after standing for a few moments, suddenly let out a loud cough. I'm talking a deep, throat-rattling, wet cough that sounded like he was coughing up a lung. It echoed through the bus, and I could feel everyone around me stiffen. There was a collective moment of panic, as if everyone knew exactly what that kind of cough meant in the age of COVID-19. I could see the person sitting closest to the man glance nervously at him before fumbling for the sanitizer bottle in their bag. It was like the bus had instantly turned into a scene from a dystopian movie. People started shifting uncomfortably, some even pulling up their masks just a little higher. And then it happened. The man coughed again, but this time, it wasn't just a cough.
It was a spray.
A wet, projectile-like spray of saliva that hit the side of the bus near the door. A couple of passengers gasped, and one woman loudly exclaimed, "Gross." I could see her visibly cringe. I, on the other hand, was in complete shock. My mind was racing. Did that just happen? Did I really just witness that? But what happened next made things even worse. The man, still oblivious to the chaos he just caused, pulled out a bag of chips from his coat pocket and started munching away as if nothing had happened. I couldn't believe it. People were visibly avoiding eye contact with him, and some were even subtly backing away, trying to distance themselves from his rapidly deteriorating personal hygiene. I could hear whispered conversations and see eyes darting nervously in his direction. And still, the man kept on eating his chips like he was completely unaware of the havoc he was wreaking on the social dynamics of the bus. As if the situation couldn't get any worse, the bus hit a pothole, causing it to lurch to the side. In that moment of unsteady movement, the bag of chips he was holding slipped from his hands. I watched in horror as it tumbled down to the floor, landing right under the seat where I was standing. The man, after finishing his last bite, looked down and casually bent over to grab the bag, now covered in what appeared to be a mix of germs and dirt from the floor of the bus. For a split second, I thought he might just leave it. But no, he picked it up, dusted it off, or at least tried, and without a second thought, he started munching on the chips again, ignoring the whole disgusting spectacle unfolding around him. At this point, I was in full panic mode. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. I tried to stand as far away as possible, holding my breath to avoid inhaling any of the foul air. But it was impossible to avoid him. The man's presence seemed to be growing, his stench and disregard for social norms taking over the entire bus. People were beginning to look around nervously, exchanging concerned glances. Some were even staring at their phones, trying to pretend they were unaffected, but I could see the anxiety written on their faces. The final straw came when the man suddenly turned to me and, without any warning, asked if I had a napkin. I froze. My brain went into overdrive. What did he want a napkin for? I glanced down at his mouth, which was covered in crumbs, and it hit me. He didn't just need a napkin, he wanted me to give him something to clean his mess up. I was horrified. I could feel the bile rising in my throat, but I somehow managed to muster up the courage to politely decline. "Sorry, I don't have one," I said, trying to avoid eye contact. The man looked disappointed, but didn't argue. He simply grunted and continued to munch on his chips, as if nothing had happened. The rest of the bus ride was nothing short of a survival mission. I held onto the pole as tightly as I could, praying for the next stop to arrive so I could escape the situation. And when the bus finally reached my destination, I bolted off as soon as the doors opened, desperate for fresh air. I swore that day that I would never take the bus again. There are just some things that no amount of hand sanitizer can fix. I don't know what happened to that man, but I'll never forget the experience. And to this day, I still can't look at a bag of chips without feeling a little bit of nausea. Moral of the story: sometimes, public transportation is a lot more than just a ride. It's an adventure in survival. It was supposed to be a quiet evening. I had just finished a long day at work, and all I wanted to do was curl up on the couch with some takeout and a good Netflix show. But life had other plans. You see, I live in a small apartment complex, and the walls are thin, so thin in fact that I can hear every little thing my neighbors do. I'm used to the usual sounds: The faint thumping of footsteps, the occasional sound of a door slamming, and, of course, the murmur of voices. But that night, things were different. It started with a loud knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated for a moment, wondering if it was just someone in the building who had the wrong apartment. But then the knock came again, this time more insistent. Reluctantly, I got up, slid on my slippers, and opened the door. Standing there was a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, maybe in his early 30s, wearing a wrinkled suit and a look of obvious distress. His hair was unkempt, and his eyes were wide, almost frantic. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to hide my surprise. I need your help," he stammered. "I'm sorry to bother you, but please, just hear me out." Before I could respond, he stepped past me and into my apartment, his movements quick and erratic. I stumbled back in shock, unsure of what to do. "Whoa, what the hell, man?" I said, trying to regain control of the situation. "I'll explain everything, but you have to help me, okay?" "I swear, I'm not dangerous," he said, his voice shaking. "I just need somewhere to hide for a few minutes." I wasn't sure whether I should call the police or try to de-escalate the situation, but something about the urgency in his voice made me pause.
Why?
"Who's after you?" I asked, still standing in the doorway. "It's a long story," he said, looking over his shoulder nervously. "But I promise, I'll explain everything. Please." I stared at him for a moment, unsure of what to do. I'd never been in a situation like this before. Should I help him? Or should I just tell him to get out? I could hear footsteps coming from the hallway. 3 quick steps followed by a loud thud. Someone was approaching. My heart raced as I glanced at the man. "They're coming," he whispered, panic in his eyes. "Please, just let me hide in your closet or something. Just for a minute." Something about his desperation made me do the unthinkable. I moved aside and let him slip past me, leading him into my bedroom. My heart was pounding in my chest as I watched him crouch down next to my closet. "Thank you," he whispered. I nodded, still unsure of what was going on. "Just stay quiet," I said, my voice tense. I walked back to the front door, half expecting someone to knock, but the hallway outside seemed eerily silent now. A few minutes passed, then 10, then 20. The more I waited, the more I felt the panic rise in my chest. I kept hearing strange noises from outside my apartment, muffled voices and footsteps that came and went. It didn't seem like anyone was directly looking for him, but the tension in the air was palpable. Suddenly, the sound of my phone vibrating on the table broke the silence. I jumped, my heart skipping a beat. I glanced at the screen. It was a text from my best friend, Liz. The message read, "Are you okay? I just saw someone talking to the guy from apartment 3B. He was acting all weird. Don't open the door to anyone." I felt a chill run down my spine. The guy who had just barged into my apartment was from apartment 3B, the same apartment Liz had mentioned. I quickly typed back, "What are you talking about?" Liz's reply came in almost immediately. "I think something's wrong with him.
He's not who he says he is."
I saw him talking to someone earlier today. It looked suspicious. Now I was really freaking out. My mind raced as I tried to process the information. Should I confront him? Should I call the police? I couldn't ignore the fact that something felt off about this whole situation. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to check on him. I quietly made my way to the bedroom, holding my breath. As I opened the door, I was greeted with an eerie sight. The man was no longer crouching in the closet. Instead, he was standing there, staring at something in his hand. It was my wallet. "Hey!" I shouted, feeling a surge of adrenaline. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He spun around, his face pale and panicked. I didn't mean to," he stammered. "I'm sorry, I thought I'd lost mine, and I was just—" "You thought you'd lost yours?" I interrupted, stepping closer to him. "That's my wallet, man." "I know, I'm sorry," he said, backing away slowly, still clutching my wallet in his hand. "I didn't mean to steal it. I swear I didn't." I was about to yell at him again when I heard another set of footsteps. This time, they were much closer, too close. I froze, and the man's eyes went wide. "They're here," he whispered urgently, darting toward the window. He opened it with a snap and peered outside. I followed his gaze. Standing across the parking lot were two men, both wearing dark jackets and looking in my direction. They didn't seem to notice me, but the man in my bedroom seemed to recognize them. He froze, eyes wide with terror. "Shit," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're coming for me. Please, you have to let me go."
Please.
I was paralyzed, caught in a whirlwind of confusion and fear. What was going on? Who were these people? And why was I involved in this? But before I could say anything, the man bolted out of the window, climbing out onto the ledge with impressive agility. I rushed to the window, peering outside, but by the time I got there, he was gone, vanished into the night. For a moment, I stood there, unable to process everything that had just happened. Then, I heard the door to my apartment swing open. It was Liz, standing in the doorway, her face pale. "Are you okay?" she asked, stepping inside. She took one look around, and then spotted the open window. "What the hell?" she whispered, looking out at the empty ledge. I don't know what happened," I stammered. "I think I just got caught up in something bad." Liz gave me a concerned look. "You have to call the cops. You don't know what's going on, but it's serious. He could have been dangerous." I nodded, my head spinning. It was one of those moments where I just didn't know how to handle it. Was he a criminal? Was I now an accomplice? I didn't have the answers, and for the first time in a long time, I was scared. In the end, I never heard from him again. No one ever came looking for him, and the whole thing was just over. But I'll never forget that night. I went to bed, still unsure of what the hell had just happened, but knowing one thing for sure, that quiet evening I had planned was anything but. TLDR, a random guy knocks on my door asking to hide from someone. He breaks into my apartment, steals my wallet, and then bolts when some shady men show up. I'm left confused, terrified, and unsure of what just happened.
So, a little backstory.
I've never been the most coordinated person in the world. Growing up, I was always that kid who tripped over air, managed to knock things off shelves for no reason, and had a unique ability to turn even the simplest tasks into a full-blown disaster. Fast forward to adulthood, and while I've gotten better at controlling my clumsiness, it still finds a way to sneak up on me at the most inconvenient times. Anyway, last Saturday, I had an eventful morning. My wife and I decided to do some spring cleaning, which was long overdue. We live in a small house in the suburbs, so the mess tends to pile up quickly. My wife, being the more organized one, had a detailed cleaning schedule, and I was tasked with a variety of things like dusting, vacuuming, and sorting through old stuff we didn't need anymore. I'm not exactly thrilled about cleaning, but it's one of those chores that you just have to get done. After an hour or so of working, I decided I needed a break, and I grabbed my phone to scroll through some social media. While I was checking the latest updates, I got a message from my best friend. We'll call him Mike. Mike and I have been through a lot together, so when he messaged me about something exciting, I was curious. He had sent me a link to an article with the message. "Dude, you need to check this out, it's insane." I clicked the link, and it led me to an article about a local charity marathon that was coming up in a couple of weeks. The article highlighted the amazing work the charity did, and it encouraged people to sign up and participate. Now, here's the thing, I'm not the most athletic guy. I've never run a marathon, and honestly, I've barely run a mile without feeling like I'm going to collapse. But for some reason, in the moment, I felt really motivated. I thought, hey, I could totally do this. I'll show Mike that I'm in good shape, and this could be fun. I immediately texted Mike back, telling him that I was in. Mike, being the competitive guy he is, responded with an enthusiastic, "Hell yeah, bro. Let's do it." And with that, we were both signed up. The race was a 5K, which, on paper, seemed manageable. Sure, I hadn't run in years, but I was sure I could pull it off. Right? Fast forward to the night before the race. I hadn't trained at all. Not a single run. But I figured I'd just power through it. My wife, who had seen me sign up, asked, "You sure about this?" I confidently told her I had it covered. After all, how hard could a 5K be? People do it all the time, right? I went to bed that night feeling surprisingly optimistic. I had my workout clothes laid out, my running shoes ready, and a bottle of water on the counter. I set my alarm for 7 a.m. so I could eat a light breakfast before heading to the race. The morning of the event, I woke up, feeling a bit nervous, but still determined. I ate a small breakfast of toast and fruit, then started mentally preparing myself for the task ahead. I was excited to meet up with Mike, and we had plans to meet at the race location about 30 minutes before it started. When I arrived at the race site, I was surprised by how many people had shown up. There were easily a few hundred participants, all stretching, warming up, and chatting with friends. Mike was already there, waiting for me by the starting line. He was looking pretty fit, as always. I greeted him, and we talked briefly about how we were going to crush this 5K. The race started, and the horn sounded. It was chaos. People sprinted ahead, and I found myself trying to keep up with the pack. My legs immediately started to burn, and I realized just how out of shape I was. The first mile was a struggle. I was gasping for air, and my calves were already sore. I told myself to just push through. I kept telling myself, only 2 miles left. You can do this. It's just a 5K. By the second mile, I was completely exhausted. I had slowed down significantly, and I was now in the back of the pack, watching people pass me left and right. Mike was long gone, and I started to feel a little embarrassed. I could barely catch my breath, and I felt like I was about to collapse. I had nothing left in the tank. But then, something amazing happened. I spotted an aid station ahead with water cups, and I thought, okay, I'll just walk for a few minutes, get some water, and then finish strong. So I took a break, sipping some water and trying to catch my breath. That's when disaster struck. I was standing there, feeling good for the first time in the whole race, when a volunteer at the aid station handed me a cup of water. I took the cup and, without thinking, spilled the entire thing down my shirt. I wasn't sure how I managed to do it, but somehow, I spilled water all over myself. My shirt was now soaked, and I could feel it sticking to my skin. I looked around, and there were a few people walking by who had witnessed the whole thing. They were trying not to laugh, but I could see the amusement in their eyes. At this point, I was so tired and defeated that I just started walking, completely ignoring the race. The soaked shirt didn't help my confidence, and I began to mentally check out. The remaining miles were a blur of sweaty, painful steps. I finally crossed the finish line, dead last, and my shirt was completely drenched. Mike was already there, high-fiving everyone and congratulating them for finishing. He looked at me, smiled, and said, "Dude, you look like you took a swim in that water station." At that point, I just laughed. Honestly, it was the only thing I could do. The whole race had been a disaster, but I had survived. As I took a seat to recover, I couldn't help but feel a mix of embarrassment and pride. I had finished, even if it was a mess. Later, I texted Mike and told him that next time, I was definitely going to train before signing up for a race. He agreed, but added that the real challenge for me would be keeping my shirt dry. He wasn't wrong. So, yeah. TIFU by signing up for a 5K without training, getting totally out of shape, and somehow managing to spill water all over myself halfway through. The race was a disaster, but I'll always remember the experience, just not as a runner's triumph. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.